Arcane Season 2 is finally here, and I couldn't resist using this as a chance to study its incredible art style. In today's video, I'll attempt to replicate this frame straight from the new trailers, taking a close look at all the textures, lighting, and stylistic choices that bring this world to life. I'll be testing out my own painting and rendering techniques, aiming to pick up some tricks that can bring my work to the next level. Before jumping straight into drawing, I set aside some time to analyze the style in depth. Here, I've pulled a mix of frames from the new season trailers. Taking a broader look across multiple artworks, let me break down the essentials of Arcane style, from the brushwork to the cinematic lighting and unique details. This pre-study analysis helps me work with purpose and clarity. Instead of diving in blind, I get a roadmap to the unique details that make Arcane's visuals so captivating, helping me know exactly where to focus in my study. Now, with a clearer picture in mind, I can start painting. I chose this shot because Jinx's face is always rendered with so much depth and personality, and capturing that will be a perfect way to practice my rendering and painting skills. Since my focus here is nailing the rendering and brushwork, I'll start by tracing a line art to guide the main shapes and forms, keeping things moving faster. These lines are only temporary and will be removed by the end, but they'll provide a solid roadmap to get the look just right. To streamline the painting process, I've set up separate layers for each of the main elements to make the painting smoother and more flexible. This setup allows me to work on each area independently, which really helps with fine-tuning details without affecting other parts of the composition. I'm also using clipping masks on each layer, making it easier to adjust colors, shadows, or highlights as I go. This way, if something doesn't look right or needs tweaking, I can make changes more easily. So here I have the hair, face, clothing, and accessories. For the background, I decided to give it a rough approach. I started by sketching out the main shapes, like the jacket details on the left and the lady figure on the right, keeping it all fairly loose. To get that soft focus effect, I applied a Gaussian blur, just enough to create a shallow depth of field that keeps the focus on Jinx's face. It's quick and simplified, but does a decent job of capturing the background's vibe in the original scene. With the background set, I dove into rendering Jinx's face, starting by mapping out broad shadows and slowly layering more detailed tones. I built depth by working from lighter to progressively darker shades, letting each layer carve out her features. For me, this face does the most of the heavy lifting, as it defines the forms and gives depth to the face. Now, you might notice that Jinx's skin has a blue tone, which might look unusual at first, but that's the exact color I sampled from the reference. Sticking to these choices, even when they feel a bit off, is a big part of learning to trust the process in study like this. Here, I'm detailing her eyes, and just when I was getting into it, bam, my computer crashed, corrupting the Photoshop file. I went back and repeated the same process as before, except for the background, which I honestly didn't feel like recreating again just then. I'll add it back in later using the same method. For now, I just left the screenshot as a placeholder, so if you notice any differences here and there, that's why. You know, every study comes with its fair share of challenges. Losing hours of work can feel discouraging, but it also became an opportunity to refine my workflow. I took note of the mistakes I've made, like not saving backups, and figure out how I could work more efficiently in the future. It's a good reminder that even when things go wrong, the process is still valuable for learning. Now, as you can see, I'm continuing to focus on the shadows, carving out the form of Jinx's face. One of the challenges I often face is striking the right balance between highly rendered areas and those where I want the brushwork to remain visible. In this particular screen, the most textured parts are centered around Jinx's eyes and nose, while other features have smoother surfaces, reflecting a more typical 3D rendering style. I think that one of the key aspects of Arcane's visual language is the pronounced sharpness of elements like the eyes and mouth. They have clearly defined contours, especially when compared to how these features are rendered by other artists or in different styles. However, the brushwork adds a layer of softness, blending the 3D foundation with a gorgeous 2D texture. Once I had Jinx's face blocked in, it was time to tackle the hair, a challenge I knew I had ahead of me. Replicating those strands was tough. They're filled with countless tiny wisps, each with subtle variations, not to mention the endless shades of blue that are so hard to replicate. Hair isn't usually my strong suit, but these locks really put my skills to the test. I went back and forth several times, adjusting the shapes and colors, trying to capture that perfect balance between detail and stylization. After a lot of trial and error, I finally landed on a version that felt right, and continued with the rest of the details. In this study, I'm trying to mimic that painterly yet controlled look. It's all about being intentional with each stroke, rather than just blending everything into a smooth finish, which isn't easy at all. As I shared in my previous video, link in the info card on the screen, I've been struggling with brush control. I tend to get caught up overwork in certain areas, spending too much time on the same spot and slowing down the overall process. I'm constantly practicing to enhance my painting and rendering skills, and I feel like I'm making progress, but the road ahead is still long. With all the elements blocked in, it was time to dive into the finishing touches. I began by focusing on textures, which is where the magic really starts to happen, and then I move on to refining all the subtle details that pull the whole piece together. I zoomed in quite a bit to understand what made the original reference so captivating compared to my attempt, gathering insights to apply in future projects. For instance, I noticed that some areas in the reference were much softer than mine, so I adjusted those sharper areas to better match the overall look. And after countless hours of meticulous work, here comes the final result. Looking at the final result, I'm proud of how much I've learned from this piece. But really looking at how they use texture, I feel like I'm starting to understand more of what goes into making a piece that feels both painterly and polished. And now it's time to challenge myself by applying this approach to some of my own character designs. Hope you enjoyed this breakdown and feel inspired to try out some studies of your own. See you next time. Bye!